What's up, guys? I just want to say thank you again for letting me hit 1K subs. That's pretty cool. So, 1,000 plus subscribers and growing. Anyway, let's get into some obsessive stuff, because that's what we do here. We get real freaky with these rackets. So we have the Pure Aero 98, a 16 by 20, compared to a Pure Aero 100, 16 by 19. So these are both the newest generations of both rackets. All right, and I have them lined up in a particular way. So I have these lines put down here, and I'll explain them in just a second, but let me break down how I lined up the two rackets real quick, because the Pure Aero 98 is a little bit smaller of a head size than the Pure Aero 100, so you might be wondering, how did you line it up? And the way I generally line up two rackets, I'm mostly interested in how the crosses compare around the sweet spot, because I'm looking for something that's dense in the sweet spot area. Has a lot to do with the kind of control that I want, but also string density for string breaking reasons. I want a racket that kind of has a tighter string pattern so I don't break strings quite as quickly. So I really lined up the crosses around here, right at the top of what I would consider to be the sweet spot. And as you move down, you can see that the Pure Aero 98 is just ever so slightly tighter, right? It's still lined up here, and then it starts to go down a little bit, and then it starts to go down a little bit more. I mean, it's a really small difference. And then right here, it's the same again, you know? And then you move down, actually, and it's like, oh, the Pure Aero 98 opened up more than the 100 did. And as you move down, you see that's more and more true until about down here. They're about the same again, right? They're still the same, and then on the Pure Aero 98, you have a whole extra cross string. So sometimes on a racket like this, you'll have a 16 by 20 compared to the 16 by 19, and the bottom and the top string will be kind of in the same spot, which would imply that the string is more dense on the denser string pattern. But that's really not the case with the Pure Aero 98, which is interesting to me because the Pure Aero 98 is kind of marketed as the more, maybe the control version of the Pure Aero, but is it? Is it really? So look at it this way for me, all right? Look at the Pure Aero 100 on the right and look at the Pure Aero 98 on the left. Just look at the string pattern. Which string pattern looks more dense when you look at it? Just kind of look at it. Look at the sweet spot on one and look at the sweet spot on the other. I mean, it's pretty obvious, even just by looking at it, that the more dense string pattern is actually on the 16 by 19. So I think it's really easy to make the case that the 16 by 19 has a more control-oriented string pattern, or at least a more control-oriented drill pattern, while the Pure Aero 98 has a smaller head size, which smaller head sizes are kind of associated with being a more control-oriented head size. So what are you really getting out of the Pure Aero 98 that you're not getting from the Pure Aero 100? It's hard to say. I've played with both rackets. I mean, ultimately you should play with both if you want to formulate your own opinions, but check this out. You have the 19th cross pretty much lined up here on both rackets, and then the Pure Aero 98 has a whole extra cross, right? And you can see that the bottom cross is a lot further from the throat than it is on the 98, right? But if you go up here, the top cross on the 98 is still a little bit higher than the top cross on the 100. And you start to piece all these little details together, and you can see why the Pure Aero 98 actually looks a lot more open. In fact, the string bed seems really linear, like the squares don't really get that much smaller as you move across the string bed, whereas on the Pure Aero 100 it clearly gets more dense around the sweet spot, right? You have some big rectangles here, some big squares over here, and then as you move towards the sweet spot, they get a lot smaller. The string pattern just starts to close up. And I really appreciate this. This is something that Yonex actually does pretty well on the E-zone. So it's like where the ball is hitting the string bed the most, the strings really come together and start to focus their control and their density around the sweet spot, which I really appreciate. So in some ways you have a 16 by 19 that plays like a 16 by 19 in terms of things like dwell time and how the ball's going to launch out of the racket, but you also have characteristics of a denser string pattern because the strings are closer together, especially where it matters, which is, you know, in the sweet spot where you should be hitting the ball most of the time. So it's interesting to me that on the Pure Aero 98, the string pattern is just more open. So you do have more strings, but the strings are spaced so far apart that even though the racket head size is a little bit smaller and you have an extra cross string, you can just look and tell that the sweet spot and the string pattern on average is just so much more open. So which one's going to be able to generate spin better, the Pure Aero 98 or the Pure Aero 100? Which one really is the better control racket? And I think when you compare the two string patterns like that, it really starts to raise some questions. So I just wanted to make a case for something that I thought was an interesting thing to observe. This is something that I typically do with a lot of rackets anytime I'm intrigued by them. But yeah, this is very interesting to me to find that the Pure Aero 98 has a more open string pattern than the 100, especially when the Pure Aero 98 is marketed as being the more control-oriented version of the Pure Aero series. So if you like that, thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe, like the video, and let me know in the comments if you guys have any additional questions. And if you guys have any racket comparisons that you would like me to make in the future, let me know, but I do have some more coming up very soon. So I will see you guys in a future video, and yeah, that'll be all for this video. All right, take care.